Oh, so this is fun. As time goes on, the worse it gets. Okay, let's start things out kind of slow because it's been almost 2 weeks since what happened in at Stoneman Douglas in Florida, right? Referred to as the Parkland shooting. And what's really funny about this is the complete lack of accountability. I mean, I'm sure by now that you guys are fully aware of the fact that people try to dodge responsibility all the time, and especially people trying to maintain a political status. So, as more look, when I posted my last video about this, you guys came out, and I do read the comments. I do pay attention to what you guys are putting out, and a lot of you guys started sending me links on certain things. And of course, before I do anything on it, I do have to research it myself, and I do have to make sure that it's good to go as far as what to talk about. Make sure that it's accurate and whatnot. However, turns out I'm not the only person trying to pay attention to this as well. Turns out, which is actually a little. It gives me a little bit of hope, because in a unspoken way, this has kind of been a national bipartisan investigation into the failures of the system in Broward County to safeguard the lives of the students there. And there are a lot of different news stories from traditionally very liberal and traditionally conservative viewpoints that, to me, signals a little bit of hope. I mean, at the very least, we can think whatever we want of each other, but at the very least, it really shows that the bottom line here is that we want stuff like this to stop. Yeah, there are different ways that different people are trying to approach it, and yeah, some viewpoints look incredibly nonsensical and seem to gaslight bickering between one side and the other. But at least you can understand, as an individual, that when you see what, or rather hear what it is that I'm about to talk about, you can definitely see that essentially both sides of the viewpoint do essentially want the same thing, and they want stuff like this to stop. Period. Right? Now, this was a multi-pronged failure on everybody. Everybody within an established bureaucracy or system, and it doesn't surprise me that it isn't a huge and smoldering failure, because this tends to happen a lot. Right, where people try to over-legislate or try to over-politicize or try to over-politic things, and then you get massive disasters, including ones that are utterly tragic, like this most recent one. So I'm going to talk about this again. I'm going to talk about, Sheriff Scott Israel, and man, he just gets slimier by the day. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the systems surrounding the shooter, and I'm going to talk a bit about the Broward County School Board. Right? Now, this gets a little ridiculous, so let's go ahead and get into it here. Now, this comes from the Miami Herald, right? And let's bullet point a few things here. First and foremost, the original reports about the shooter being expelled from the Broward County school system, not just a school, but a system, including Stoneman Douglas, he was never expelled. Ever. From Stoneman Douglas, like ever. Okay? And the reason why I refer to it in that way is because Stoneman Douglas was like a rival to Everglades, where I used to go. Right? He was never expelled in the first place. And the current school board system basically does not permit expulsion from the Broward County school system entirely, right? This guy repeatedly fought people, threatened others. He cut himself. He ingested gasoline in an attempt to kill himself. He repeatedly terrorized and threatened horrible violence to students or just other people. Like, there are reports of this dude like putting guns to people's heads and stuff like that. Just people that knew him or lived near him, things like that. He was transferred to many different schools, including schools specifically dedicated to treat those who were essentially your problem children, the ones that had serious emotional issues to deal with, and even still, they were unable to deal with his violent and unruly behavior. BSO, or Broward Sheriff's Office, right? Scott Israel claimed that his department received 23 calls regarding the shooter, which, first of all, that's already terrible. That's already terrible that you guys didn't do anything. I mean, anything about 23 individual calls that were made about this guy, and every single one of them were essentially the same thing. This dude's crazy. He's doing violent shit. You gotta stop him. None of that happened. But that's also what's also ridiculous about this as well is that that's false. It's false. Over twice the number that Scott Israel said that as far as calls that were made to BSO were made. He says 23, there were 49. So almost 50 times was BSO contacted. Okay, people calling 911 on this guy, or calling in the tip line or something, and it includes both of those. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And a lot of the calls that were coming in towards the end of this whole thing, leading right up to the actual shooting itself, there were people calling BSO and tipping the FBI at this point, saying that this dude is a ticking time bomb. What's really interesting about this is that Scott Israel also says that there was nothing legally that they could have done, about this guy. There was no way that they could have taken his firearms away or anything like that, which is also crazy, incredibly false. Why is it false? Well, dude's posted on social media several times that he was going to be the next professional school shooter. That's a terrorist threat and a crime. Okay? He's brandished firearms in an improper way. Misdemeanor in Florida. Okay? He's threatened students with bodily harm or their lives. Guess what? Also illegal in Florida. Many opportunities did BSO have the chance to take full advantage of the legal system in place. Place this dude in cuffs, take his guns away, do something. None of those actions were taken. And what's really screwed up is that he was still within the school system. But if you research it, and it's really easy to research, just look up Florida. There was because it's very important that we look up Florida and Broward or Miami-Dade or the nearby and surrounding area to Broward County, because there were people that were in the workforce that did similar shit. Prison. Okay? Prison. So, why was nothing done? Why was nothing done? That's what everyone keeps asking, right? That was from the Miami Herald, right? That's where these little bullet points came from. Okay? In an article that I was reading up on. CNN. That one's pretty easy to research on your own, but there was a report on 1 and then 4 BSO officers that stayed outside stayed outside the school when Coral Springs took over and began to clear the scene. Okay. Scott Israel. And by the way, what's really funny is that the formal complaint filed by Coral Springs, was deemed by Sheriff Scott Israel as a pack of lies, essentially, saying that complaint and demands for his resignation were all politically motivated. So you mean to tell me that a separate police department that had to do your police department's job, and in doing so were unable to save the lives of people, complained about it, and that's politically oriented and false? Okay. That makes a fuck ton of sense. Here's another one. Also a traditionally left-leaning news agency. MSN reports on an investigation being carried out by BSO that is looking into the number of officers from BSO that did not enter the school. Their internal, their own internal investigation, right? It's been nearly 2 weeks since the shooting, and the cameras that were at the school, as well as radio traffic, have not been released to the public, and there's no report on any progress of the investigation whatsoever. It's been 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks, and you can't decipher the radio traffic that was going on at the time? Are you serious? It's been 2 weeks, and you weren't able to pull any camera footage from the school? When, again, as a kid, I went to Broward County schools. Cameras are they're fucking everywhere. They're everywhere. And you mean to tell me that this investigation is still going on? Laura Ingraham at Fox reports on her show that their sources within the BSO stated that the BSO officers on scene were told not to go into the school because they did not have body cameras turned on, which they never had in the first place. And that they lost comms with the upper echelon, like the dudes on the ground lost comms with their dispatch and shit like that during the event. What? This isn't Afghanistan, dude. Florida is ridiculously flat. How do you lose comms with 4 dudes? I don't understand this at all. Okay? And ordinarily, when I hear something like sources close to or sources within from a news agency, I just discard it entirely. I discard it entirely because it's not someone coming out on record and doing this. But the only reason why I cannot confirm but will lean in the direction of this being true is the simple fact that police departments function very similar to a military, right? When some really fucking retarded stuff happens, and when people start being held accountable for it, and when investigations are going on, right? If it's the upper leadership's fault, it's really, really difficult for anyone below that leadership to throw those guys under the bus without repercussions of some kind, right? Like on a legal basis, they can't kick you out or, or give you an Article 15, demote you, whatever, but they'll still make life hell until your time is done there. So a lot of people see that and will come out very quietly and say, don't say my name, but this is what happened, right? And the only reason why I would buy this for even a second is because, again, I've been in the military for almost 10 years now. Anyone that's had that much time or less has probably seen some similar shit before, right? So it's starting to make a lot of sense now, unfortunately. It really is, because all this really is political grandstanding, and, Mr. Israel is doing his very best to slip the jab. Fox News also reports that EMS was barred from entering the school against their protest, right? Meaning they want to go in, but they're being held back from going into the school during key moments in which lives could have been saved. The key moment means the golden hour. If someone suffers a severe injury, gunshot wound, something like that, if you don't get to them inside of the golden hour, meaning the first hour that it happens, their chances of survival are incredibly low. Right? And that's where EMS wants to come in. Now, this could conflict very slightly because of the fact that, anytime that there's that shots are fired in any capacity whatsoever, local law enforcement does have to clear the scene and send it up and say, okay, it's good for EMS to come down now, but this is well outside of that time, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? So there was one guy that completely disregarded all of this shit. The one courageous dude on the scene decided that he was going to go in regardless to what he was being told, and he actually did manage to save somebody, at least one person. He's been all over the news too. Okay. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, more on the conservative side of the house. Breitbart runs an article on Broward County schools and their desire to reduce the school-to-prison pipeline, cooperating with Broward Sheriff's Office to place the school principal in charge of possible criminal behavior before the school resource officer in an attempt to curb crime. So essentially, like, if somebody is in possession of marijuana or steals some shit or whatever, right? Or threatens somebody, fights somebody, anything that has anything to do with like criminal behavior, a lot of times the principal himself would get involved in that before the school resource officer. Or at the very least, if the school resource officer is the guy that pulls somebody apart, you go to the principal and he decides what to do. And the only reason why I believe this for even a second is that I started thinking back to my individual childhood. Okay? As you could probably imagine, I talked a lot of shit in high school. Okay? Because I'm a noodly person, and the only way that someone like that can function in a public school is you learn how to talk a lot of shit and you learn how to fight. Right? I remember being in Everglades High and being in a fight with somebody. Two of the four resource officers that were there pulled us apart. They brought us into the principal's office, and the principal gave us a really big ass chewing over what had happened and threatened us with like law enforcement penalties and all kinds of shit like that. We're just dumb kids, okay? We got into a fight. But that resulted in nothing. Right? So in that instance, I completely understand it. But this gets even worse, right? Because this is taken to the nth degree. Now, I'm leaving links to all of these sources in the description below, so you guys can go read up on a lot of this yourself. But the Conservative Treehouse expounded on even more of this. Now, this is from the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights and School Discipline on October 21st, 2010. Right? It was a couple years after I got out of school. High school, that is. In recent years, many school districts across the country have begun to adopt strict zero-tolerance discipline policies that impose increasingly harsher punishment for seemingly minor infractions. These disciplinary measures, in school or out of school suspensions, alternative school placements, expulsions, and referrals to police departments and juvenile authorities. This disrupts a student's education and diminishes their chance for success. For too many students, these school-imposed sanctions lead to the criminal justice system, a pathway commonly referred to as the school-to-prison pipeline. Regrettably, studies have shown that children of color are disproportionately affected by zero-tolerance policies, a trend that increases already significant disparities. Eric Holder. It goes on to shout racism from the mountaintops. Later on it says, never before have our two agencies come together in this way, or brought together such a large and diverse group of partners to discuss the best ways to ensure that civil rights and educational opportunities are protected for every student at every level and in every community. But this is just the beginning of what I know, and I pledge will be an ongoing conversation about how we can better understand the causes and most effectively remedy the consequences of disparities in student discipline. I want to assure all of you that for me, for Secretary Duncan, for the agencies we lead, and for the administration, this work is a top priority. So, as you can probably imagine, right, and I didn't really put much of this together, as you can probably imagine when these people are running political grandstanding and stuff like that, it's usually done in one of two ways. Either they implement a probably going to be wildly unsuccessful political agenda into a policy, or they use school districts to test bed this shit, right? Guess what? Here's a timeline. All right. Between 2007 and 2012, the Broward County School Administration made a policy decision to block arrests of students in order to improve their education statistics. 2013, that same school board was warned what was happening as a result of that policy. 2015, the school board doubled down on the divisionary policies and allowed students to break the law, including physical violence without legal consequence. January 2017, the shooter, I won't reference his first and last name because you don't get one when you get retarded like that. The shooter criminally assaulted someone. Again, law enforcement engagement was blocked by policy. A year later, in February of 2018, he did what he did. And the question is apparently this: what happens when you stop arresting students for clear criminal conduct and then lessen the school punishment therein? You get what happened 2 weeks ago. So, kind of fucked, I think. Right? Because all of the things that people have to say about what's his face that's been on the news, talking all kinds of really crazy shit about gun ownership and whatnot, whatever, okay? But there are multiple people in multiple places from different sides of the political spectrum actually investigating this and essentially coming up with the same damn thing. So I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions on that and be as angry as you want to. Because to be honest, I'm so infuriated at this, I've come full circle to where I'm just kind of dead-faced at this point. Because how it is that we get things like this from the ineptitude of a system that's supposed to be educating our kids. Okay. When, yet again, sensitivity, politics, and people crying racism have caused some crazy shit like this. Who knew, right? Really? When you just don't arrest people for criminal conduct. When you just don't do anything about it. Did you expect anything less? Oh wait, but guns are the problem. I'll go ahead and turn over everything that I have so that your inept fucking police department can fail to do anything of any real merit. Oh, and this is after, most likely a late response time. I'm so done. I'm so done with this discussion on guns. It's not even funny. Okay. What I'd urge you guys to do is pay very close attention to who says that they're on your side politically, especially politicians. The GOP says that they're not even going to talk about gun control. Bullshit. Okay? The Republicans have failed us a million times. Ronald Reagan, the dude that everybody says was the shit, right? He's the reason why you have to file for a tax stamp for your Pilatos. Bush is the reason why soldiers and servicemen across all branches are not allowed to carry a firearm at all on a federal installation. These people will fail you. The only reason why they haven't repetitively failed us is because they're elected because they say that they're in favor of certain things. And if we don't hold them, and if they don't keep up their end of what they were hired for, they know they'll be fired. That's the only reason why they support what they do in the first place. All politicians really care about is their seat. So, make them accountable for what it is that they were voted in for. And oh, by the way, vote out anyone that doesn't solve the correct issues. This is mental health. This is allowing law enforcement to do their jobs. This is dealing with the correct solutions rather than trying to improve your quota numbers. Okay, because shit like this is fucked and I'm done with it. I'm 110% done with anyone that wants to have a gun control conversation. So, yep, that's it. I'm out of here. Have fun with this. I didn't.